It became known as the Night of Terror. On November 14, 1917, guards at the Occoquan Workhouse in Virginia violently rounded up over 30 female inmates and forced them into cells on the men's side of the prison. Lucy Burns was chained to her cell door and left wearing a blanket. Dora Lewis was knocked unconscious and believed dead. Dorothy Day had her arms twisted as she was rammed into an iron bench. The stories of abuse went on. And what was the crime? Standing silently outside the White House gates, holding signs. The women were suffragists from the National Women's Party, and 10 months earlier, they had started daily pickets at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Day after day, in all weather, the so-called Silent Sentinels raised banners calling out President Woodrow Wilson. Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty? Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage? The idea, conceived by leader Alice Paul, was simple. Bring Wilson face-to-face with the suffrage question every day and convince him to support votes for women. By today's standards, the quiet pickets might seem tame, but in the spring of 1917, to many Americans, they were an unpatriotic distraction as the nation entered World War I. Bad manners and mad banners, as one letter to the Washington Post put it. Even some leaders in the splintered suffrage movement, like Carrie Chapman Catt, called for an end to the demonstrations, fearing they would do more harm than good in the court of public opinion. But Paul and her Sentinels were adamant. The necessity for protest against discrimination was never greater than it is today, when such important decisions are being made. Publicly, Wilson appeared unmoved, often repeating his stance that suffrage was not a federal issue and should be decided by the states. Inside the White House gates, however, administration officials seethed. As the pickets continued, their messages got more pointed, using Wilson's own words about defending democracy abroad against him, and comparing the president to Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm. By summer, as clashes between picketers and crowds increased, police began arresting the women on charges of obstructing traffic. But if authorities hoped the arrests would curtail protests, they grossly miscalculated. As the women were hauled off to jail, the NWP sent more picketers to the White House gates. Meanwhile, longer and longer sentences and reports about harsh treatment stunned many Americans, even some who disagreed with the demonstrations. When D.C. officials denied the picketers' demand to be recognized as political prisoners, many went on hunger strikes. Prison officials responded by force-feeding them raw eggs through nasal tubes. The National Women's Party was quick to seize on the image of white society women being treated like, quote, Negroes and criminals. It ran counter to middle-class sensibilities on race and gender, and the message resonated, especially after news of the Night of Terror began to leak out. Newspapers, including the New York Times, shared startling accounts. Workhouse prisoner Eunice Brannon compared the cruelty to German war atrocities. Nothing, short of murdering and maiming non-combatants, could exceed the brutality that was used toward us. It was a turning point. Against the backdrop of the war, public support for women's suffrage was growing, and the workhouse uniform became a potent symbol for the movement. In January of 1918, President Wilson blinked. Almost a year to the day after the White House pickets began, he announced he would push Congress to pass a constitutional amendment enfranchising women. Alice Paul and her Silent Sentinels kept up the pressure to make sure that they did. And in the summer of 1920, the 19th Amendment was finally passed and ratified by the states. There would be more work to come to make sure that all women could exercise this freedom, but votes for women was the law of the land at last. For more stories from DC area history, check out our Boundary Stones playlist and subscribe to WETA PBS.